The border closed tight. 151,000 illegal aliens arrested for deportation. These are major accomplishments for the second Trump administration, but the left is bent on stopping him at any cost. The question many are asking, where do we go from here? I'm Hayden Ludwig. America still faces a drug crisis of unbelievable proportions, the product of Mexico's brutal drug cartels. In 1981, just 3 American men per 100,000 died from drug-induced causes. Today, it's over 47 and climbing. At the same time, the radical left is organizing mass campaigns to disrupt and even physically threaten immigration officials carrying out Trump's mass deportation mandate. The country's welfare, indeed its very future, hangs in the balance. We're joined by Sheriff Ross Teeple of Pinal County, Arizona, to offer insights straight from the southern border itself. Sheriff Teeple, thanks for joining Restoration Spotlight.
I appreciate the offer to be on, sir. It's an honor.
Now, let's talk about your county, Pinal County, nestled between Tucson and Phoenix, obviously due north from the Mexican border. It goes without saying you get a lot of illegal drugs that pass through your jurisdiction. Give us an overview of how things have changed since Biden left office and Trump took office back in January of this year.
Well, now that we don't have a treasonous federal government, the border is pretty much shut down. The cartels are going back to what we call the pre-Obama game plan, where they're delivering drugs in more remote areas, which again affects Pinal County disproportionately than other counties. But that being said, it's all but stopped because this invasion is not being funneled and funded by our federal government. The change in admin was a difference between night and day.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I've read elsewhere, different counties in Texas, for instance, they went from 40 to 50 border crossings per month in a small county. I'm thinking of Kinney County in particular. I think its population 3,000 people, down to maybe 1 or 2 over the entire year since President Trump took office. What's the experience like? I realize you're not right on the border, but in Pinal, what's the experience like?
Well, this is something that I like to explain to people that aren't familiar with Arizona. It's difficult unless you actually see it firsthand, but there is a Native American reservation called the Tohono O'odham Nation that crosses the international border. Part of the Tohono O'odham Nation is in Arizona, part is in Mexico. They have dual citizenship in both counties, but if you think the terrorist organization that is the cartels is not victimizing the people of the Tohono O'odham Nation, then your eyes aren't open. So that's the big thing is we're not a border county. We're not on the international border, but the international border literally is Pinal County because of the Tohono O'odham Nation.
It's almost like 3 countries operating next door to each other, right?
Yes, sir, it is. Mexico, the Tohono O'odham Nation, and the state of Arizona. Is
there a lot of complicity on the reservation for allowing traffickers through or even helping them through?
Well, they're being victimized by either monetary considerations or by force. I've seen both in my long law enforcement career. The Tohono O'odham people are not rich. They don't have a casino like, you see up in the valley where it's just printing money. So
sure.
The regular citizen that lives on the reservation doesn't have a lot of money. So the financial encouragement by the terrorist organization that is the cartels is a great draw to some of them. And if they don't take the money, they're going to be forced to do the job anyway.
Yeah, it makes sense that would be a weak point. You mentioned something a minute ago, calling the cartels a terror organization, obviously referencing a decision the Trump administration made early on into coming back into its second term to label these cartels foreign terror organizations. Now, that isn't just a name. That opens up a whole range of possibilities for even military involvement by the president against these organizations. Just as background, we know that the foreign terror organization list includes Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, for instance. And when Trump did this in his first term, labeling Qasem Soleimani a foreign terror organization official, it opened the door for an airstrike that ultimately killed him. So I'm interested in, what do you see as the strategy, being a border county sheriff here, what do you see as the strategy from the new administration taking on these cartels by labeling them an FTO that wouldn't have been possible, say, in the first Trump administration?
Well, the biggest difference we see from local law enforcement is we're finally getting recognition for this very dangerous organization that is, and we're going to get some responsibility from the Mexican government, because once you start identifying them as a terrorist organization, then you have the country of Mexico has to decide whether they're going to support the terrorist organization or they're going to support us from taking out that terrorist organization. Because U.S. law enforcement can't go into Mexico to take out a terrorist, but the U.S. military can, because the cartels have killed more people with fentanyl than all the American soldiers that died in Korea and Vietnam combined.
Yes, over 100,000 a year. I mean, not even close. That's right. Compared to maybe the 7,000 or so servicemen who lost their lives in the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. I mean, it is war by other means, isn't it?
Yes, sir. It is. It's absolutely war by other means. They have weapons of war. They have all the workings of military organization because they are a terrorist organization. They're the one thing I read is the Medellin cartel is better financed than the smallest 6 countries combined. Their GDP is that low.
Yeah, I've often thought it's like Walmart with an army. Basically, that's how well organized and financed these groups are. Let's talk about the other aspect since the Trump administration returned, and that is deportations. So there is obviously a big mandate from American voters to deport these violent criminals, of which we've deported well over 100,000 of these people. I believe the number is actually more like 150,000 just since January. That's all the work of Tom Homan and President Trump, of course. Now, you and I had spoken about where this had happened down in the Tucson area. There is a major ICE facility down there, kind of your neck of the woods. I think it's a different county. I think it's Pima County, if I remember correctly. But we had spoken back in June about an arrest that your office had made with the Pima County Sheriff's Department against a drug trafficker tied to a one of these cartels, or a foreign gang, rather. I don't know if we know which one it is, where you'd arrested this guy for trafficking millions of fentanyl pills, illegal handguns, and other drugs. But when you bust this guy, a bunch of anti-ICE protesters come and think that you're what? You're ICE trying to deport this wonderful human being who's just here for the American dream? I mean, fill us in on that. Tell us the story of that, and who are these morons?
I call them idiots on the internet, and I still say that their actions were completely idiotic. That they don't have independent thought. That's the biggest thing that I found with these No Kings protesters is whatever you tell them to think, or whatever their higher ups told them to think, they're going to listen to that, and no one's going to change their opinion. They were protesting at an ICE facility. They received notification either via a direct text or an app that they were using that there was a quote-unquote ICE arrest around the corner. So they went to where we were arresting an individual that had 5 million fentanyl pills in his vehicle, had 32 pounds of cocaine and 22 pounds of cocaine and 32 pounds of methamphetamines. He's a prohibited possessor. He's already been convicted in a U.S. court of a felony, so he's not allowed to own a firearm. He's already been convicted in Mexico of a felony and is not allowed to own a firearm. And he had an active warrant for his arrest from the Mexican government. And this is the person that we're taking into custody while he has 6 firearms on him. They decide to come and protest that. And then the big thing about it after our guys showed, look, these are subdued patches. You might not be able to see it, in the fading light that it says Pinal County Sheriff's Office, but up close, see it's subdued. It says Pinal County Sheriff's Office. Oh, we know you guys can dress up like trash collectors. You could also dress up like the Sheriff's Office. And then we seized his car, which was an instrumentality used in a crime. We seized his car. A fully marked Pinal County Sheriff's Office tow truck shows up to get the car, and they blocked the tow truck from leaving. I want to give credit to the Tucson Police Department because they sent out their mobile field force, which was able to clear the roadway so we could get the car. And I've asked every single one of these No Kings protesters, did you think we were deporting the car? Did you think that the car didn't have process rights? Because you just keep regurgitating the same thing over and over again.
Okay, so this was part of the No Kings anti-Trump protest. What, do only kings deport criminals? I mean, even if this guy was just an illegal alien, hadn't committed any other crime other than entering the country illegally, which is a federal crime, let's just be clear about that, right? Even if he hadn't done this, No Kings, what does that have to do with immigration enforcement?
I've been trying to figure out the No Kings. I have a friend I went to high school with. He is a dyed-in-blue liberal, grew up wanting to be a reporter, writes for a very liberal rag, but we could still have intelligent conversations. And I've told him, that they need to understand that this no kings that they came up with is not resonating with the normal voter. I talked to the normal voter out there, and when they asked me, why are these people standing on the side of the road with no king? And I said, well, it's apparently something against Trump. And they were like, he's not a king. He was elected by 2/3 of the population of the United States. If you want to talk about someone that could have been a king, it's the other side where Kamala Harris was appointed to be the Democratic nominee. No one voted for her. That is how kings go into power, not the way Trump was elected into office.
What do limousine liberals in, I don't know, Scottsdale think about that?
Yeah, you pronounced that incorrectly, sir. It's called Snotsdale.
Oh, my mistake.
Sorry, a little Arizona humor in there.
No, it's great.
They don't think for themselves. They're sitting up in their ivory towers drinking their Earl Grey tea with their pinky stuck out. And they think that every time they raise the minimum wage, it's somehow going to hurt their working class. Where if you paid any attention in high school economics, every time you raise the minimum wage, it only destroys the middle class because it makes the middle class smaller and smaller. So I don't think they actually think. I think they listen to NPR and PBS, and they just that's who thinks for them.
Yeah, right. Somebody's minimum wage goes up, but there's fewer jobs available. I mean, this is so obvious. Everybody should have learned this by now. But sticking with this topic, I watched the video that your office released from June from these anti-ICE protesters, and you hear them chanting, "Go home," and trying to shame your officers into, "Do your wives know what you do?" Yes, I think they absolutely know what they do, and they're proud of their husbands and their sons and their fathers for the kind of work that you're doing, enforcing state law and federal law in this case, but the law of the land. It blows me away that now you have more organization around trying to stop the deportation of violent armed criminals who are spreading a lethal drug designed by the Mexican cartels to lethally addict you. I mean, addict you enough until you overdose anyway and drop dead. That's unbelievable. And this isn't just happening in Arizona, right? I mean, this is everywhere.
Yes, it is absolutely everywhere. And one of the things it's so poignant that we're having this interview today, because right after I get done with this interview, I'm going to be going to the Arizona Narcotics Officers Association opening ceremonies where I'll be giving a speech. And you're talking about some of the people that will be at this conference were at that drug bust. And when they talk about, well, ICE shouldn't cover their faces up, law enforcement shouldn't be afraid to show their faces. Do you not think that the cartels want someone to pay for the fact that they lost $5 million in fentanyl pills, not to include the meth and the cocaine? These people, their families do know what they do for a living, and they worry and pray about them every day they go out and put their lives on the line to keep our community safer. So yes, the idiots that were yelling, do your families know what you do for a living? Yes, they do, and they pray for them every day.
You're absolutely right. I've interviewed other border county and border state sheriffs who talk about, if you did this job in the 1980s, you dressed in what it was basically a business suit almost, right? You wore a little revolver and it was very relaxed, very easygoing. Now you have to dress and prepare like you are invading the border. You have to have high caliber weaponry. You have to dress with bulletproof vests, camouflage uniforms, BDU like they wear overseas. Because it's a war zone. It's a war zone. I want to talk about part of the reason why it's become a war zone. So let's focus in on fentanyl, because we have talked a little bit about this. So if you look at maps of what they call high-intensity drug trafficking areas across the entire country, these are areas where you have a prolific amount of drug trade going on, usually by the cartels. You see the stunning display from 2018. Most parts of the country are dominated by methamphetamine. 5 years later in 2023, virtually every single one of these high-intensity drug trafficking counties is dominated by fentanyl. Now, Sheriff, we know China is deeply involved with them. We know that they've given or sold the pill presses that are used to manufacture fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid, to these cartels. Walk us through, from your vantage point, how has the growth in the synthetic opioid exploded in Arizona over the last, let's say, 10 years or so? What is China's role, and what can we do to stop that?
I want to commend Donald Trump for one of the ways he can stop it is he's been instituting these tariffs, which at least gets them to the table so they can talk. But We need to stop China. China has never been our friend, never will be our friend. If you look at through the totality of history, they have never been a friend of capitalism and a free country. And for them to provide the means and the resources for the cartels in Mexico to poison and kill U.S. citizens, it is clear that they're the enemy. One of the things that I just had a conversation with a family member on is if you think about it, if Nazi Germany invaded the United States today, and just like they tried to invade other countries or did in World War II, if the Nazi Germany invaded the United States today, Democrats would be protesting, saying we didn't give the Nazi soldiers due process before we sent them back to their
Right, they're newcomers. Yeah. That's unbelievable.
Exactly right. I consider myself an Arizona native. I'm also a police officer, so I have to admit that I was actually born in Michigan, even though I never lived there. I'm old enough that the doctor thought my mom was 8 months pregnant, and I turned out to be 9 months pregnant. But with that being said, I consider myself an Arizona native. I've lived here for 56 years, except for when I served in the Navy. And I am told that I don't actually have the right to my land because we stole it from Mexico, who stole it from the Native Americans. So somehow I don't have rights to my own land, but someone comes here and puts 1 foot on American soil, and now all of a sudden they have more rights than I do.
Yeah, exactly. You can't even begin to reason with the hypocrisy on all of this. So, one thing that President Trump, we talked about before in terror organizations earlier, one thing he's floated is more military involvement south of the border. So this wouldn't just be border enforcement when people try to come over here. This is actually taking precautionary steps to stop anybody or illegal traffickers from reaching the border, period. So we know, for instance, that the CIA has spy drones operating over the Sinaloa cartel and other cartels just on the other side of the border here, not shooting at them, just monitoring them. So that's a lot of intelligence. We know that certain segments of the U.S. military are training with Mexican Marines in drug interdiction off the coast. This is a controversial topic, though. I mean, the idea of getting involved deep in what is effectively Afghanistan at your southern border isn't going to be popular. But a lot of people look at the issue there and they see this, you have to stop it at the source. Now, obviously, cutting the drug demand in the United States is the number one way to stop the demand, obviously, for all these drugs to come in here. What do you think about the idea of greater military intervention in Mexico itself using U.S. assets, whether it's special forces or guys on the ground, whatever? Do you support that idea? Do you think it's the next step that we have to take to actually defeat these cartels?
I absolutely support it, and the citizens of Pinal County support it. I'm fortunate enough to serve as the 25th sheriff of Pinal County. Pinal County is a ruby red county, and there's no controversy where I live as far as using the U.S. military to do what the U.S. military does best. Right now, we had to pass a law in Arizona that enables local law enforcement to be able to shoot down drones because the cartels are now using drones to fly in drugs at a record pace.
Wow.
Because the actual border has been shut down by the great men and women in the U.S. Border Patrol. But as soon as those drones cross back over international space, U.S. law enforcement is restricted from doing anything about it. The U.S. military, on the other hand, would have free reign, if given by the president, to take down those drones. And that's why it's so important what they're doing. God bless every single one of our military members. They're out there. They are truly the world's first responders, because whenever there's a problem in the world, the U.S. military is always the one that is expected to go and secure peace. We just want them to secure peace on our southern border.
Well, you compounded that with the fact that the government of Mexico basically doesn't rule in huge segments of northern Mexico anymore. It's effectively ruled by the cartels. So it's become this no man's land where if they're not going to rule, maybe we need to send guys in there to actually enforce law. What do you think about that?
It seems to be a commonplace all around the world, and I don't want and will not let it happen in Pinal County. I have a family member that's actually a police officer in Sweden. Sweden has effectively taken certain parts of the country and called them no-go zones because there it's the outlaw motorcycle gangs that are controlling certain parts of Sweden. And so they just say, we don't go into them zones. And we've seen that in the United Kingdom. We've seen it in the outskirts of Paris, France, where my beautiful wife is from. And now we see it in Mexico, where the Mexican government has thrown up their hands and said, we cannot control this area of our own country, so we're just going to give it over to the cartels. It's pure anarchy, except we need to stop it.
Now, as we close out, let's talk about the 2026 election that's coming up. There's a big governor's race in Arizona. And we wish that all of Arizona was as ruby red as Pinal clearly is. Unfortunately, we know what Phoenix is like all too well. It's going to be a close race. This is going to be a controversial one. You have a governor there, Democrat Katie Hobbs, who, to my knowledge, has visited the border exactly once. I may be wrong about that, but I believe she's only ever been there once, and it was after intense pressure and a few years in office, if memory serves, before she even deigned to visit the border. Being a border state governor, it's unbelievable. What did the people of Arizona think about the border as an issue going into this? Do you think 4 years of the open border crisis under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris has changed their minds a little bit? Or watching the success of President Trump's deportation mandate actually carried out, will that play in as big in 2026 as it might say in 2024?
The statistics I just was reading this weekend put it clear to me and clear to the citizens that I talk to. The Democrats are trying to float the fact that the cuts to Medicaid will close rural hospitals. The cuts to Medicaid aren't going to close rural hospitals. They're closing the access for illegal aliens to get health care in large cities, which is, once that's taken away from them, it will increase the self-deportation. That's what the citizens of Arizona are saying, is the fact that the number one group of people that are on Medicaid right now are working age males. And until we get the records, we know a huge part of them are illegal aliens.
Yes.
Statistically, it's impossible for them not to be. So that's something that's still in the minds of Arizonans is the fact that we have a large percentage of individuals here that did not care about the rule of law. They do not care about the United States. They care about getting here by violating the law and then sucking off the tit of the American people. Sorry to be so blunt, but that's what's happening. And that's why it's so important to the citizens of Arizona. I think it's funny that the governor that's currently in office, she did not go visit the border until Trump won the election. So the
That's
border
right.
wasn't a concern. And then 2/3 of the American people said, yes, the border is a concern. Now she wants to form a border strike team. Well, we could have used it 2 years ago when there was 4,000 people a day crossing the international border that is a autumn nation. And now, last month, we had one.
Unbelievable. And last question as we close out here. You mentioned Medicare earlier. How do we get people to self-deport? So we're not just talking about violent criminals. We're talking about the 20, maybe it's more, million illegal aliens living in the United States. You got to cut them off from having jobs and government benefits so that the country becomes unlivable to these people. It's not cruel. That is loving your neighbor who's an American citizen who's already here, because that person's paying the price in multiple ways. Last thoughts here. What are your recommendations to the administration to encourage that kind of self-deportation?
Stop treating the illegal aliens better than you treat my fellow veterans. And they're doing a great job right now. They're already progressing with that. But why is an illegal alien put in a hotel that costs $500 a night when I have fellow Desert Storm veterans that are homeless, sleeping under overpasses right now? So if we take away the benefits, the self-deportation is going to happen. It's happened in the past. If we take away their Medicare, if we take away their food stamps, if we take away their free housing, their Obama phones. I mean, a poor person on welfare in the United States lives better than about 40% of the world, if you think about that. So if they come here, they're already going to be living better than 40% of the world because we hand them everything for free. Sorry.
That's exactly right. Well, Sheriff Ross Teeple, thank you so much for joining us, and God bless all your work down on the border.
God bless you. It's an honor to serve, and thanks for having me on and getting the information out there.
I'm Hayden Ludwig, and this is Restoration Spotlight, a project of Restoration News, your source of headline-smashing investigative journalism for the America First movement. Check us out at restoration-news.com. And until next time, stay vigilant and trust in God.